Happy Friday, everybody. So this is one I started yesterday, but it's become a little bit different, and I hope everything's working. So let's blast through it and get to the end. This is the updated Bitcoin wealth pyramid for May 2023, and a lot has changed. This whole market is in a constant change of flux. And of course, Bitcoin has perfect monetary policy, but let's dig into what's happening. And again, I'll go through the first part fast because we covered it yesterday, and then I had an outage. But let's just jump in and talk about Bitcoin's unique digital scarcity, who's plowing in and where people are buying. So first of all, we do have a quick survey in the chat as to where people land, just for fun. But we know all the animals most people tend to be shrimp and crabs. Shrimp are less than 1 Bitcoin, crabs are 1 to 10, octopus 10 to 50, etc. But we may even have a few fish, which are 50 to 100. There's a lot of people that have been in Bitcoin a long time. There was a time when Bitcoin was $10, $100, $300, so it was much easier to stack. Now, yesterday I did cover real quick who is stacking right now, and as of May, the 10,000 plus whales are accumulating like crazy. Everybody else is distributing. So always follow the aggressive plays of the big whales because they are right 70 to 80% of the time, and they are looking forward to the next halving. The next 12 months will be very exciting. Or should I say 11 months and 1 week to the next halving. So 3 weeks left. Let's talk about real quick reminder, the share of Bitcoin across cohorts in 2021. You can see most of the Bitcoin was with the 1K to 5K whales, 18.4% of the supply. A couple of things have happened since that supply, since 2021. Obviously, everything that the miners mine goes into the fresh supply, and there are some ancient coins, there are some lost coins, there's the Satoshi stash. All of that needs to be taken into account when you do this type of analysis too. The other thing I want to point out is the shrimps only held 4.9% of the supply in 2021. Let's see how that has changed. Here you can see the change experienced by cohort, that the smallest entities, shrimps and octopus, saw relative growth, while some sharks, the 500 to 1K players, and the small whales, the 1K to 5K whales, and the miners and exchanges saw big contractions in supply. But the humpback whales, they are the 5K plus, 10K plus whales, also grew a lot. And that is key to note. So you have kind of like a barbell effect. You've got the shrimp on the very low end stacking like crazy, and the 10K plus whales stacking like crazy too. In addition, let's look at the number of holders, which is important. We had 22 million shrimp back in 2021, and we had 220 whales, and then everything else in between. I did promise I'll go fast, but this is how it changed to today. You can see here the number of shrimp. Oh, this got mixed up again. Oh, this is so... I froze the graphic this time, but I'll talk to it anyway because I know the numbers. So it's gone from 22 million shrimp to 32 million shrimp. We went from 560,000 crabs to 740,000 crabs. We went from 72,000 octopus to 80,000 octopus. And I'll talk more about what that means exactly. Fish, 11K to 12K. The dolphins went from 10K and they were flat. They remained at 10K. And then we had sharks, about 1,500. That went down to 1,450. Then we had whales. The 1K to 5K whales went from 2,000 to about went down to about 1,450, I think. And the humpback whales went from 220 to 190. But the important thing is when you break these all down, the humpback whales, which are big whales, they actually, even though the number went down, the amount that they hold actually went up on average. So this looks really trivial to analyze, but it's actually a lot trickier than meets the eye. Now, a quick reminder as to what happened by all the cohorts. This is since 2017. You can see that in supply ownership across all entity sizes, and the people that grew the most are those with less than 10 Bitcoin. Shrimp and crab, they basically absorbed all of the Bitcoin mined pretty much to a large extent since 2017. And the other cohorts, the dolphin and shark and the whale and humpback, kind of steady, but they fluctuate depending on the market. They tend to sell when the market's hot, and they stack like now. That's the important thing that I want the audience to pick up as well. And I drew this little graphic yesterday. It's like a smiley face. You got the humpback on the left. There's not many of them, but they own a bucket load of Bitcoin. And the blue is the average bag balance in dollars. That's the price of Bitcoin today at 29.5 multiplied by the amount of Bitcoin that they have. And on the right-hand side, you have population. And you can see there's over 33 million shrimp, 32 million shrimp. Again, they don't have a lot of Bitcoin, but they're large in numbers and everything else in between. So just always remember that kind of smiley face. Now let's look at the distribution, the average number of Bitcoin per animal. If you are one of these animals out there, the average number of Bitcoin for the humpbacks about 14,400, whale about 1,800, shark 763, dolphin 214, fish 74, octopus 21, and the top 1% own about 3.7 Bitcoin. That is key. Now, it is not a linear relationship like you would imagine. The distribution is not normal, and that's what makes it really tricky as well to figure this out. Now, the average Bitcoin holdings, I just covered that. Why is that a duplicate slide? Anyway, not to worry. Did say I'd go fast. Let's look at some bag sizes as well, just to give you some perspective as to how this can skew the actual numbers we've seen above as well. So MicroStrategy, they have 4.06 billion in Bitcoin. That's 140,000 Bitcoin. You have the US government, nearly 6 billion in Bitcoin. That is over 200,000 Bitcoin. And then you have Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. They have, I think, about 629,000 Bitcoin, which is worth about $18.9 billion as well. So they're examples of products that are available to retail. We'll talk more about how many of these shares, etc. you need to have one Bitcoin, which is an important number too. But remember, this can skew the data that you see for the whales, which, if you didn't have these super mega whales holding 140,000 Bitcoin, and of course they have coins in multiple wallets at Coinbase, etc., it can give a very different perspective as to exactly how big the players are. Now let's break it down to the cohorts today. In share of Bitcoin in dollar terms, you can see over time, over the last 2 or 3 years, all cohorts except for whales, they are the 1K to 5K whales, have actually gone down a little bit, only fractionally. Every other cohort has gone up in terms of dollar terms, and that's important as well. So not only have the number of Bitcoin, they have gone up for everybody, more or less, but also the dollar amount too. And the other thing that's interesting to know about this too is in terms of dollar terms, it's nice to see the spread of distribution. Like sharks are kind of equivalent to dolphins, which are equivalent to octopus and crab. And that's what we want to see. We want to see equal distribution of this asset across many cohorts. It's not perfect, but it's also not bad considering it's such a young product. Now let's look at the cohort view as well. This is since 2019. And the thing to point out here again, if you look at the cohorts with more than 10 Bitcoin and everything else is less than 10 Bitcoin, you can see that since 2020, the more than 10 Bitcoin has been flat. And that's why I mentioned before, everybody with less than 10 Bitcoin has been stacking since 2010, 2019. And that is important. That means all the new mined Bitcoin goes straight to retail, and the other cohorts didn't actually accumulate any, which is also a good sign. Another view of this is the share of Bitcoin you can see across all the different cohorts. Shrimp have 8.2%, crabs 13.3%, octopus 11.5%, fish 6%, dolphin 14%, sharks 11%. And then the whale 17.8 and the humpback 18.1. So the humpback whales are still the biggest. And that actually makes it a little more tricky as well to understand exactly what's going on. But it's also a positive sign. If you saw the humpback whales and the whales dumping, that would not bode well for the future. So think of it as a good sign when the big guys are buying more. Now, this is kind of a whole bunch of summaries before we get into the Bitcoin wealth period and some other data points. But how it all shapes up, because there's a lot of confusion out there, and you can read sometimes things on Twitter that are just patently false about what it takes to be in the top 1 percentile, etc. But we've done the work. And here, just in a quick summary of a whole bunch of different data points. And yes, the top 1,650 holders of Bitcoin, do own 35% of the Bitcoin. But remember, that also includes things like MicroStrategy, Grayscale, US government, etc., the Ukrainian government. They have big bags, and that skews it a lot. And when you break down exactly how many retail customers, I think 36% of all MicroStrategy shares are held by retail. The rest is held by Michael Saylor and institutions. When you break that down, you can assume that there are a lot of retail that actually hold MicroStrategy as a proxy for Bitcoin. Now, if you take the top 14,000 holders, they own 60% of all the Bitcoin. And then the bottom 33 million own 40%. It's kind of staggering when you think, okay, 60% is owned by 14,000 bags, and then 33 million own the other 40%. So just to put things in perspective. Now, humpback whale, to be in this category, you would be in the top 0.006% of holders, with on average about 14,400 Bitcoin. To be in the top 0.08, you need 75 Bitcoin. So getting 75 Bitcoin a long time ago wasn't hard. Today, it's very hard. Whales, they're typically 1,855 Bitcoin, put you in the top 0.005%. Then sharks, 763 Bitcoin, the top 0.01%. Dolphins, 214 Bitcoin, the top 0.04%. And then to be a fish, you need about 74 Bitcoin. The fish is a weird category because the way the distribution is kind of not normal. And then octopus, you need 21.75 Bitcoin to be in the top 0.3%. And to be in the top 1%, you need 3.7 Bitcoin. And then to be a crab, this is kind of weird too, because a lot of people got their first Bitcoin and then they started buying more and more and more. So the difference between the top 1% and the top 2.5% is very, very slight. It's just over a Bitcoin. And that is also fascinating about these actual results too. Let's remember the proxies as well. There's a couple of fascinating data points here. Again, more numbers, sorry about that. But if you look at how much it takes to own one Bitcoin, with Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which is trading at 16.93 at a 37% discount, it only costs $18,000. So you save over $11,000 to buy one Bitcoin today. But remember, I'm not promoting Grayscale here. I'm just showing how you can be a whole coiner with a lot less than $30,000 if you go this route. But again, pure form always, never hold more than 10% of your Bitcoin in a proxy. Very important as well. Always stress this in the very beginning of the channel. Be careful out there. Also, Bitcoin price, if you want to hold it as MicroStrategy, you would need about 92.4 shares. This was 86 shares a couple of weeks ago. Now it's 92.4 shares. Their total holding is 140,000 Bitcoin. You take that by the amount of shares outstanding, and the amount of Bitcoin per MicroStrategy share is 0.0108. And you could buy a whole Bitcoin for $29,999. It's amazing. These numbers actually auto refresh based on the prices. That could be over 30,000 now. But it's actually a premium to buying Bitcoin. And there was a time not too long ago where you could have bought, I think, a whole Bitcoin using MicroStrategy for about $8,000 because their asset price was so beaten down. It was insane compared to the actual price of Bitcoin. Anyway, that's how quick these markets move. And there are other proxies as well, but they're kind of the two main ones you need to look at. Let's talk about wealth as well before we get into the wealth pyramid, because this is also some interesting perspective. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Finances in the US, to be in the top 1% of net worth, now you need, and this is as of March 2023, you need about $10.3 million. If you're in China, to be in the top 1%, you need about $1.6 million. And if you're in India, to be in the top 1%, you need about $100,000. On average across the world, based on the Credit Suisse 2021 report, you need about 7.9 million. So again, these things vary depending on economic conditions, foreign exchange rates, etc., etc. But just to give you an idea of where you stack up. Now we're going to switch gears and look to what it takes to be and how much money it takes to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. Remember, a very small fraction, which we'll talk about in a second too, actually own Bitcoin. So here we are, the updated Bitcoin pyramid, and this is a moving target. It changes all the time, not only because the price of Bitcoin changes, but also do the allocations you need. And I already see a slight typo. Duh. So first of all, forget the text on the left. Let's just look at the pyramid. The pyramid is correct, but there's a 4.7 instead of 3.7 on the left. So ignore that. And last time I did this, the very first time I did this was 3.35 Bitcoin to be in the top 1%. And it's gone up as more crabs exist. The institutions are coming. The big buyers are coming in. They're buying more. The 10K whales, the 5K whales plus are buying more. And many more entrants drive the percentiles up. That is the important thing to remember. But to be in the top 0.1%, you need more than 31 Bitcoin, and that would cost you nearly $1 million. To be in the top half of a percentile, you need more than 10.8 Bitcoin. That would cost you 318,000. And to be in the top 1%, that I don't know why this didn't update, but the number is right. But that 4.7 should be 3.7, and the total amount is 109,000. That is correct. So ignore that 4.7. I'll tweet this out later and share it on Patreon as well with the data behind it. Also, the top 2.5%, you need more than 2.5 Bitcoin. Notice the closeness between the top 2.5% and the top 1%, and that will cost you 73,000. And then the top 5%, you need a quarter of a Bitcoin, which is only 7,400. So the things tail off real fast. Based on the distribution. And those that were in earliest, one of the reasons I always say get in early, get in hard, because it pays off in the future rather than jumping into kind of Bitcoin now when it's much more expensive. But Bitcoin only a few months ago was half the price, which is, again, how fast this market goes. And this is the most important perspective. Everybody here who's in Bitcoin, which I assume is most of this channel, the good news, it may not seem, may seem hard to crack certain top percentiles in the Bitcoin pyramid. But to put things in perspective, okay, only 0.42% of the world's population has Bitcoin. That is 33 million people over the population of 7.94 billion people, call it 8 billion. So the good news is, if you have even a tiny little bit of Bitcoin, you are already ahead of 99% of the world's population. And we know fiat is going to zero. Bitcoin is hard. It doesn't inflate, it actually deflates my calculations. So that is the good news. In addition, if Bitcoin was evenly distributed in the world as of March 8th, there would be approximately 193.6. I don't even know what that number is, but it's 100 million times 19.3 million. And assuming 8 billion people on Earth, there are exactly, if it was evenly distributed, 242,000 Satoshis per person, or $71 each. That's how rare this thing is. That would be 0.00242 Bitcoin per person. So even if you have a fraction of Bitcoin, you have a lot more than the rest of the world. That's the perspective. Just remember this chart. You can't even see the little dot. It's less than a pixel, but it's mathematically correct in terms of volume to the actual population of the world. In addition, there's a lot of the 0.28 fallacy that's out there. And some people say you only need to own at least 0.28 Bitcoin to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. And this is, they believe, because the top 1% own 37.5%, etc. And they come up with the fuzzy math. But this is not how it works. So if the top 40%, i.e. 7 million Bitcoin, was held by the top 1%, you divide that by the number of people that are in that cohort, 330,000, that would give you at least 2.1 Bitcoin per person in the top 1%. And again, it is not right. That is just simple math to illustrate the point. And remember, there are large wallets that represent MicroStrategy, GBTC, governments, etc. So it technically is more widely dispersed than the data gives up. And also remember, this is kind of the most important thing. And what we've seen is we've seen the adoption go in the last 2.5 years go from about 33 million shrimp, from 22 million shrimp to 33 million shrimp. That's a huge amount of growth. And as more people adopt Bitcoin, it will become harder to get into the top 1% by virtue of the fact. This is because the total supply of Bitcoin is limited to 21 million. I always say there'll never be more than 15 million Bitcoins, 14 million, because so many are lost and so many is locked up, etc. But as the number of Bitcoin holders increases, this means that the average amount of Bitcoin held by each Bitcoin holder will decrease, and therefore it makes it harder and harder to break into that top 1%. So don't be discouraged. It is hard to go, but again, interesting numbers to look at. And finally, the quick conclusion, because of adoption and because of scarcity, because of the upcoming halving, the price will just go up. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing terrible macroeconomic outlook. You're seeing terrible financial conditions. We're seeing credit crunches. And Bitcoin is just brushing it all off. And at $29,550 right now. And that shows you how strong this is going to be. And we have a very exciting journey ahead over the next 18 months. So stay healthy, everybody. Buckle in. It will be a bumpy ride, but the overall direction is extremely... it's going to go up. What am I trying to say? Anyway, thank you all. Hit the likes on the way out. Thank you to the mods in the chat. That was the update to the pyramid. We do this about every 6 months, but things are changing again. As more people come in, I estimate after the next halving, we could have 50 million people, 55, 60 million people in the space, especially with the conditions that are out there right now. People need something more than fiat. People no longer trust banks at all. But you need something that's trustless. And that's what Bitcoin is. So thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Looks like I got through it today without an electric outage. So I'm very happy about that. And I'll see you all tomorrow for the quick one in the morning. Okay, bye.